Santosh Harish, Center for Policy and Research, who's joining us on Mirror Now at this point in time. Thank you so much for speaking with us. This is, of course, an issue that every year at this point in time, at this time of the year, we talk about. And this time as well, there has been no change in the kind of the impact that Diwali has had. Winter has had stubble burning as well. Even though the courts did step in, it was just too much confusion for there to be any material difference.
Sure. Thanks for having me. You're absolutely right. And this is like an entirely predictable turn of events. We see this every year. There are discussions like this every year. There is it has already degenerated into a little bit of a farce. Um, you're right that the courts have stepped in, that there were these bans issued and so forth. But firstly, let's just take a step back, right? In the National Capital Region today, you have essentially a convergence of factors. You have the share of stubble burning in the double digits last couple of days, since the last few days. Today, it's apparently at 41% as per suffer. You have the aftermath of the Diwali firecrackers, and there have also been sort of wind conditions and so on that have not been particularly favorable, relatively calm. So it's really a convergence of these different things. Um, with both Diwali and Parali, essentially what you need is large scale cooperation among people. There is no way this will be tackled by issuing bans, levying penalties and fines and so forth. It requires people to behave responsibly. Um, at this point, like the gentleman just mentioned, the effects on children, on the elderly, and so on are apparent. You don't need scientists to be telling you these things, right? Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we need especially on Diwali, I think, we need a political consensus. This cannot degenerate into like a cultural war where, you're bursting firecrackers to prove a point and so
Yes.
on. That's insanity.
Yes, absolutely. And that's an extremely important point that you've raised because, time and again, we see this entire political blame game bickering that goes on and on over the issue of pollution. And then you have these kind of policies and bans that come into place just, at the fag end of when the situation begins to get worse. So materially, none of it makes any impact. What is your opinion or views on the kind of, bans or the restrictions that are put in place to tackle pollution and the timing of those? Because from where I'm looking at it, none of it has made any material impact in the last so many years.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think the planning has gotten successively a little better. I agree that in terms of outcomes, this would be hard to justify. But the planning has improved. The governments have become sort of more responsive and so forth. But I mean, it is that kind of a hard nut to crack. With stubble burning, for instance, a recent analysis by CEW sort of showed that two-thirds of the existing stock of happy seeders and so on that have been subsidized and distributed can cover about two-thirds of the area, right? That's under paddy cultivation, which I think is a big number, right? But the actual use is much lesser than that. This year there have been situations such as the late rains in October and so on that have delayed harvesting, increasing potentially the fires. It's too early to tell for sure. But I think if you were to break this down, right, with stubble burning, which is just an episodic source, I want to remind everybody that I think we now know enough to say that technology fixes like happy seeders and so forth won't be enough. They're helpful in the short term, but in the long term, we need to sort of take the hard path of transitioning away from paddy and faster in Punjab. With firecrackers, one needs to be persuasive. I mean, I think all the political leaders, spiritual leaders, leaders of all stripes need to impress upon people how they need to behave responsibly. With all the other sources of pollution, we need year-round efforts. We have gotten better at it, but it's not been nearly as much. It's not been nearly proportionate to the scale of the crisis. We need year-round efforts. Winter-specific plans are not going to help us in any way. Even Delhi-specific plans are not going to help us in any way. We
Yes,
need to operate at a
yes.
year-round level.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Santosh, thank you so much for speaking to us with your perspective on this extremely crucial issue.